kwangu ni heshima isiyo na kifani kualikwa kuja kuzungumza na wanachama wa chama hiki cha wanasheria wa Kenya, ambacho kwa hakika kina hadhi ya aina yake na kina umaarufu wa aina yake na kina umuhimu wa aina yake. Na mwisho wa mazungumzo yangu basi nitaeleza mambo kidogo ambayo yatahusisha lugha yetu ya Kiswahili katika tasnia ya sheria. Madam President, indeed I'm humbled to be invited as a chief guest to this august body of members of the Law Society of Kenya. Actually, the day when you emailed me requesting that I come to be the chief guest, we are in the evening session of the Parliament, and actually I was indeed a backbencher, which means I sat at the end of the plenary hall of our Parliament. And that enables me actually to read my emails without annoying the Speaker. And for me, it is so important because the Speaker of our Parliament, Dr. Turia Ackson Mwansasu, is not only a Speaker, but she is my undergraduate student. I supervised her at master's level, and I was instrumental of her going to do her doctorate at the University of Cape Town. And when she came back, I made her to be my associate dean. And I was warned in the years when I when I worked as a journalist. I remember quite in 1982, I think we were in Nairobi for the OU Heads of State and Government Summit. And one of the senior diplomats who were assisting Mwalimu, Mwalimu Nyerere, did not want to go to Mwalimu. He would always send a junior person to go there. And later on I asked him why. He says, Mwalimu Nyerere was my student at secondary school. Now there are two problems. One, he may, out of respect, not show his dismay, or he may say, does he think I'm still that former pupil and forgets that now I'm a president? Which means what? I must treat my speaker with utmost respect so that she does not think I'm still the old lecturer who taught her in class, but now she is my boss. So I was able to read the email. And then I said, perhaps Madam Faith Odhiambo has confused. But before she realized that I was not the invitee, I should promptly answer her that I'm ready to come. So that if she made a mistake, then already I have accepted. There will be no way. I'll be the one coming. And the good reason that I promptly accepted to come to the Law Society of Kenya is because this is a society which I highly respect. Highly respect. It is a society which has shown vitality, and it has helped not only Kenya, but the entire East African region during the most difficult times in the history of African politics. And incidentally, I know some of the members of the Law Society of Kenya, especially those who went and took their degrees in Dar es Salaam. And I know most of them, when they came back, they rarely found jobs in government because they were taken to be too socialist. And incidentally, now they are the most capitalist. So lawyers trained in a socialist environment and in a socialist university coming back to Kenya, now they are not only budding capitalists, but indeed they are in that profession. So they are members of the Law Society of Kenya whom I knew since when I was a student of law, and they have remained friends and brothers to today. This is why, Miss Odhiambo, I promptly accepted your invitation. Now, if you made a mistake, it's up to you. Here I am. The second handicap. When I was invited, I was a member of Parliament. And I had a latitude, perhaps for lack of better, not freedom, but I had a latitude to do many things without seeking approval of anyone. But now things have changed in the last 2 days. Now whatever I talk, whatever I say, does not represent me, but represents the government of the United Republic of Tanzania. Martha knows very well. There are boundaries you can't cross unless you are told do so. And more so in a foreign, not a foreign, in a neighboring country, not a foreign, in a neighboring country. Even when I came to BBI, what was that? At the Bombers, I had instruction to say what I said. I had instruction to say what I said, and the message to convey. And indeed, it was for me a privilege to be invited to meet all the three principals. And I'm very much sorry that Mr. Yusuf Haji is no longer with us, Senator. He played a big role, and we need all to appreciate his contribution to Kenya. And as I said, you can choose friends, but you cannot choose neighbors. Whether Kenyans don't like Tanzanians, they're your neighbors. Whether Tanzanians don't like Kenyans, you are our neighbors. And indeed, that is what has brought me also here. Let me start by saying that actually there are many interesting things. When I saw the president of Amnesty International coming here, I was part of those who founded Amnesty International in Tanzania in 1983. And it was not easy, because at that time Amnesty International was viewed not positively but negatively, and we had to circumvent that by appointing as our chairperson a respected old bishop of the Lutheran Church, Bishop Inaza Sendoro, which means when he went to see the president, it was not easy for the president to say to a respected and revered bishop no. But then we knew we need to have an Amnesty International which adheres to our culture and traditions. And at that time, there was a topic which they were nagging a lot about it. And we told them, if you bring this topic now, you are doomed. And I think you know it. So please allow us to go gradually. And indeed, I'm so happy that today I'm here also seeing you people from the Amnesty International branch here in Kenya. In the 2 years that I worked as a journalist of the Chama cha Mapinduzi newspaper, Uhuru and Mzalendo, I was assigned daily to read news about two countries. And I still continue with that habit. And that was Kenya and Uganda. So daily I read the Daily Nation. I still read the Daily Nation, daily. Business Daily, daily. The Standard, daily. Taifa Leo. And actually I like the Taifa Leo on Thursday, which has a column on Swahili. And my favorite columnist is Iribe, Professor Iribe. But I'll come to that in my second part of now my restructured presentation. I have abandoned the whole speech that I've written. Because yesterday, when I was permitted to come, which is quite unusual, permitted to come, I was reminded, you are no longer a professor. Now, again, you are a minister with a stern eye, which means I must now confine myself to things which are not in my speech. The paper was a bit different. It was too professorial and freewheeling. But now I'm before you as a humble servant of the United Republic of Tanzania, serving in the office of the ministry. We are East Africans, first and foremost. We are a product of a colonial venture. And actually, yesterday I was looking at the 1920 map of the Uganda Protectorate, the German East Africa, and the British Protectorate. And I don't want to show it here, because in 1926 it changed. Had the 1920 borders of the British East Africa remained and the Uganda Protectorate, the border was Nakuru, which means today Faith Odhiambo wouldn't be a Kenyan, but an Ugandan. But the 1926 Ordnance Council changed the border from Nakuru and pushed it further. And the big reason, which sometimes we don't want to realize, it was because of the injustice that the colonial administration in Kenya had done in the Mount Kenya region, where they had taken big tracts of land and they created a big population of landless people. And where did they push them to? To the acephalous societies. And when you talk of acephalous societies, we mean the societies in the Rift Valley. And deliberately, I mentioned I come from the scenic Rift Valley region of Tanzania, because sometimes people don't realize that the same Rift Valley goes down to Tanzania. And most of the societies in the Rift Valley of Tanzania, they are of the same ethnicity with the people of the Rift Valley in Kenya. And going 3-4 generations back, if our foreparents on the part of my father had remained in Kenya, today I would be part of the Kipsigis. But they went further down, and now I am Tanzanian. And lucky enough, in Tanzania, the ethnic tag is not that much important. It's out of my interest of social anthropology that I was able to trace that if my paternal grandmother, when they moved from the hills of Ethiopia down to Embu, and then go to Eldoret, and then go down. Yeah, yes, indeed. If you're from Embu, you may have some DNA from Ethiopia. And we know less about that and more about Europe. Martha, she's surprised. Perhaps we are cousins. And by the look of our eyes and our temperament, and by the look of our eyes and temperament, perhaps we are related. Perhaps we are related. This is the pity about Africa. And had the Germans not been defeated in the First World War, Rwanda, Burundi, and mainland Tanzania would be one country. It is only after the defeat of the Germans in the First World War that all their colonies were put under the League of Nations and given to mandate administration. And that is where Rwanda, Urundi was put under the Belgian administration, and Tanganyika or mainland Tanzania was put under the British administration. And actually the borders that were drawn much later, they're the borders between what is today Tanzania, mainland, and Rwanda and Burundi, 1932. And actually much of what is now northwestern Tanzania shares a lot in common with Burundi and Rwanda. And the Mwami of Burundi was the same who was a Mwami up to Biharamulo in Chato, which became famous because Dr. John Pombe Joseph Magufuli came from Chato. But now these borders are a reality, and I want to start with a historical anecdote. Why Kilimanjaro is in Tanzania, some reflections on the making of this country and its boundaries. And then another one is why Tanzania is where it is. Tanzania's colonial boundaries from the British Berlin Conference, 1884-85 until its independence. And I'll only read from why Kilimanjaro is in Tanzania, some reflections on the making of this country and its boundaries. I don't want to go to this debate where Kilimanjaro is, because it is a foregone fact, and I don't want to go into that debate at all. But you read this book, it is not true. Kilimanjaro was not a present from Kaiser Wilhelm to Queen Victoria, not at all. The imperialists were not interested in mountains. They were much more interested in rivers and lakes. Rivers and lakes. And unfortunately, they thought that the rivers in Europe, they're the same rivers in Africa, where they would use these rivers as conveyors of trade and business. But they didn't know that African rivers are wild as Africa itself. And their most contentious issue was who will be the first to get the source of River Nile. Because by holding the source of River Nile, it means you are controlling the Mediterranean. And when finally the British were able to find the source of River Nile in Jinja, it was now when the Germans demanded a bigger share of Lake Victoria. And mind you, I'm talking of Lake Victoria under the German East Africa, Dosho South Africa, not the Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda of today. So now they were able to get a big share of Lake Victoria, 51%, but also get the share of all the Great Lakes, Tanganyika and Lake Nyasa / Lake Malawi, but we insist it is Lake Nyasa. Now that action of being able to shift the border to have the 51% of Lake Victoria has a very interesting historical anecdote, and I would want to share with you. And this was a lecture by Dr. Heinz Schneppen, who was the ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Tanzania. And he has very interesting things to say here, but I'll go only to one for the sake of time. He says, was Mwalimu Nyerere aware that his personal destiny had been shaped by the borders as well? Had not the Germans in 1886, at the last minute, as we saw, succeeded in shifting the border east of Lake Victoria by 100 kilometers up north of Musoma, Julius Nyerere would not have been born in Tanganyika, but in Kenya. It would have hardly been possible for him to become here in Tanzania, Baba wa Taifa, father of the nation. What would he be doing in Kenya right now? But now, let us finish our historical fantasies. And actually, this tells us one thing. Kenyans know more about it, but Tanzanians less about it. If there's any country in East Africa that we share a lot of the ethnicities, among the 8 countries that we share borders, it is Kenya. Because with Mozambique, we share the Makua and the Makonde. And now I know the Makonde here in Mombasa, now they have been granted citizenship. And I was wondering, why did it take long? Because in Tanzania, any African living there for such a long time is assumed automatically is a Tanzanian, because there's no where you ask about your tribe. The only question, are you a citizen? But with the Malawi, we share also the Yao. With the Zambia, we share the Nyamwanga and the Bende. With DRC Congo, we share the Bende and the Manyema. With Rwanda and Burundi, and I have said it many times. The same classification of the Hutu and Tutsis were also in Tanzania and are also in Tanzania, but now they are latent because of the actions which were taken immediately after independence in Tanzania. And most assume, and that assumption is also not right, Tanzania is the most heterogeneous society in Africa when it comes to ethnicities. The most heterogeneous society. The level of homogeneity in Tanzania when it comes to ethnicities is 0.5%. And it is the only country in Africa where you have 5 linguistic groups living in that country. The Bantu, the Kushites, the Nilotes, the Khoisan, and the Afro-Asiatic. It's the only country. But today is the most cohesive and the most unified nation, because of the deliberate action which were taken by Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere immediately after independence. And his mission was to create a nation. And this is why he said, we lost to colonialists as tribes, but we won our independence as one people. Now, when you come to Kenya, we share the Suba, we share the Luo, we share the Kuria. We have a group in Tanzania called the Maragori. We share the Maragori. We share the Masai. We share the Kamba. We share the Taita. And we share the Digo and the Segechu. But we don't realize that because we no longer look ourselves at that. And in Tanzania, we have a minority Kikuyus in deep south of Tanzania, who most of them came from Kiambu, and they came with tea industry. And some of them actually, 2 of them rose up to higher ranks in the government of Tanzania. Joseph James Mungai was a minister for many years, and his young brother was a senior military officer. But Dr. Karanja was the head of the Tanzania Forest Research Institute for many years. Equally, now we have other Africans who came from other regions as liberation movements who have remained in Tanzania. And I want to link that with good governance. First of all, Africans will have the ability to survive in the most strenuous conditions. Sometimes we underrate and underestimate ourselves. We are the only people in this world who have suffered a lot and we are still there. Slavery for more than 500 years. Thousands and thousands of Africans were transported, and they're the ones who have created the Caribbean economy and the American economy. And I've been many times to the Caribbean. Actually, when I go to Jamaica, when I go to Trinidad and Tobago, when I go to Barbados, those people are more Africans than us. They are more darker than us. But what do you realize? They took the best genes, because most of them here, they won't be able to find their clothes size. We suffered colonialism for many years. I'm not saying this to justify what happened thereafter. I'm trying to show we are the people who suffered most. But we have survived. We have survived. Whenever I was a foreign minister, when I went abroad, I said, I don't want to justify what is happening in Africa. I just want to explain. There's a difference between justification and the explanation. How old is Kenya? 60, how many years? 60, 63? Are you now 63, 62 years old? 1963 to today, how many years? 60, 61. And we are 63. It does not justify what has happened, but it shows the ability of people to transform. Look at the Kenya during the colonial period and look what has happened today. And one lesson which we picked from Kenya, and I've always said it, Kenyans, you are able to rise from ashes. And the Marthas are here. And you are able to rise from ashes without bitterness. The level of accommodation of politics here in Kenya is exceptional. When the results of the elections were announced, and the way I saw Martha and the Baba, and the way I saw others is different when today I read the papers. Now with the new dispensation. Which means what? Kenya has been able to survive. Kenya has not copied any model. And this is why in Tanzania I warn them. We cannot copy whatever Kenya has done. Kenya is Kenya and Tanzania is Tanzania. But we can pick the basic principles. We can pick the basic principles. Because here in Kenya, you like it or not, you must address your best. You count numbers. We don't count numbers. We are going for election this year, for civic election, and the next year, general election. We don't count numbers. But here, numbers do matter. It's Kenya. But there are lessons which we can draw from Kenya in constitution making. Now, in good governance, what I want to share with you. First of all, the ability of Africa to change good governance, which was coined by the World Bank and the IMF as a conditionality for aid, now to make our own good governance to address our problems. Because let us not forget, up to the 1990s, there was no nomenclature such as good governance. Good governance is brought by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund as one of the aid or grant conditionalities. 1, 2, 3. If you meet this, you get a loan. If you meet this, you get a grant. And it is when now the World Bank introduced what is known as no objection, which means you borrow, but in order to be given the money, you must obtain a no objection from the World Bank again. And this no objection is based on what is good governance. In the case of Tanzania, that somehow took us out of the lane. one of the basic problems when it comes to good governance immediately after independence, and I'll take the example of Tanzania, was abuse of power. Abuse of power by those who are in authority. Abuse of power. 2, corruption. Immediately when these Africans now became ministers and became governors, they had the appetite of grabbing everything that was around and aggrandizement. But 3, embezzlement of public funds. And 4, neglect of the citizenry with their basic problems. And what were the basic problems of the citizenry? It was poverty, disease, and illiteracy. And these are the problems which actually confronted Tanzania mainland as a young nation. Immediately after independence, people became ministers. They bought shares. I don't want to talk about Kenya, I'm talking about Tanzania. They bought shares in companies. And already there was a lot of dissatisfaction from the population. And it is when now Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere in 1965 introduced what was known as the Permanent Commission of Inquiry, which is an ombudsman. And it was tasked to deal with abuse of power and corruption. And actually the 3 members of that Permanent Commission of Inquiry were respected old people. And when they came to a district or to a region, you knew there's a problem. And immediately they will file the report to the president, and they will be given another assignment or consigned to prison. Zero tolerance about corruption. So when we talk about good governance and the topic of the day, citizen participation, for me, the basic issue which we need to address in Africa today is abuse of power. Abuse of power. And this is everywhere. I don't want to say that Tanzania is immune from abuse of power. And the most notorious abuse of power, which we sometimes neglect, is abuse of power at the grassroots level, at the district level. That is where people suffer most when it comes to their basic needs. When they go to hospitals, when they go to offices, abuse of power at the higher level. We have addressed abuse of power at the highest level, which is good and okay, because definitely grand corruption depletes national resources. But we need also to address abuse of power at the grassroots level. And the question I'm posing to lawyers, I've been posing it in Tanzania and I'm posing it here. Now we are in big numbers. I was told this Law Society of Kenya, you are 20, 40. How many members of the LSK? 24,000. It's a big number. A big number. How many of us now know that our clients are those who are at the grassroots level? How have we engaged ourselves with those people at the grassroots level other than on pro bono? Because normally we think that by assisting these people, we go for pro bono. No, how have we been able to assist these people? And I don't want to talk about fees, because in Tanzania, there are some people who have been very innovative. They charge fees by using goats and cow, because they know those people cash is difficult. So cows and goats can also be fees, and then you take them to the auction and you get your money. But my interest is at that level. And this is why I thank sincerely Her Excellency President Samia Suluhu Hassan for again assigning me the docket of the Constitutional Legal Affairs, because one of the things that I want to go and put more emphasis now, because we have a Commission of Human Rights and Good Governance. Actually, the aspect of good governance was what was the Permanent Commission of Inquiry. But now when it was fused with the Human Rights Commission, the issue of abuse of power was neglected, because the donors are much more interested in funding human rights and less about good governance. So there's underfunding on good governance, which means check of abuse of power, and there's no more funding on human rights, which attracts the attention of their parliaments and the people. I don't want to say that human rights are not important, not at all. They're important. But for us now, we need to put more emphasis also on good governance by meaning that the check of abuse of power. Another thing that I would want to share with you in good governance is combat of corruption, prevention and combat of corruption. Corruption is now a perennial problem. It's a perennial problem. It is a perennial problem because most of us, and I don't want to say I'm not part of that, most of us in leadership, our vision is not the citizenry we are serving. Our legacy is no longer to uplift the lives of the majority of our citizens, but later our legacy is to leave something for our families. Here in Kenya, like in Tanzania, actually, yesterday when I was sworn in, our commissioner for ethics reminded us that in 30 days I'm supposed also to file my form on assets and liabilities. So I have 30 days. And then jokingly we said, but we filled the last one in December. He says, already it is 6 months, which means in this month, perhaps you have added more or you have spent more. And now you do it online. And I said, poor me. Because people in Tanzania know that when now I answer my emails promptly because now I'm using the phone. And actually this phone was not bought by myself, but my daughter, who forced me now to know that I can answer emails by phone. Otherwise, people knew that when I promptly reply emails, my daughter is in Tanzania. So she takes care of that, but now online. And when this thing was introduced by Mwalimu Nyerere again in the 1960s, she was scoffed off by some of the African countries, and I don't want to mention names, that you cannot have leaders who are poor. I went to another country, not Kenya. I don't want to say Kenya, another country. And then they asked me, Mr. Minister, member of parliament, how much do you own? I said, what do you mean? How many houses? How many shares in companies? How many of this? I said, none. Said, how did you become a member of parliament and a minister with that low level of personal income? I said, it's because I come from a society where the property I own does not count much. But that is what has bedeviled Africa. We engage ourselves in corruption, and at the end of the day, as the Bible says, if we live long, how many years are we given? 70. And I'm clocking 70 in few months to come. Which means, according to the Bible, in the few months to come, I'll be useless. I'm waiting to go to heaven. So is this the age now to start troubling myself of how much I save? And we need to learn to other societies. Actually, I don't want to mention one society in Asia, where actually when you pass on, the one who inherits your property is not your children, is your grandchildren, which means you work for your grandchildren. And this is why they have business for generations and generations. Because now I'll be working and saving for my grandchildren. And this is why a country like Japan and Germany, you better create a trust or a foundation rather than inheriting from a deceased person. Because once you inherit, they take 50% because it is a windfall. You do not work for it. And even that half which remains, you'll be taxed again. Which means what? From day one, you are told to earn on your own, to work on your own. So corruption is a serious problem. And when we talk of good governance in the citizenry, this is one of the areas which we need to address. Corruption. Lawyers, we have contributed to corruption in one way or another. I don't want to say that no one deserves to be defended in court of law, not at all. But we call it in Kiswahili uradhini, to conscientize our people, that this is one. And actually, if you look at the amount of money which is wasted in corruption, would have changed Africa. Yesterday, although it was night, when I was driving from Mombasa, diverting, not using the ferry, I was very much the ferry, going through these new bridges built by the Chinese, and they're doing the same in Tanzania. I said, we can do more if our leaders and ourselves put the citizenry before anyone. And this is what I admire about the Law Society of Kenya. and I don't want to talk about individuals, but the Law Society of Kenya, you have done great things for the ordinary citizenry of Kenya, but you are now an example to other law societies in the region and beyond. The second thing I would want to talk about is artificial intelligence. No, now it's the buzzword, artificial intelligence. And if you don't talk about artificial intelligence, you make a speech without mentioning about artificial intelligence, you are taken not to know what you're talking about. And the people forget that actually the term artificial intelligence was coined for the first time in 1956. Close to 68 years from today. So for 68 years, they have been working on artificial intelligence. And I'm so happy that it is part of the topics here. And initially, I was not aware of this artificial intelligence until I have a daughter who now is a senior research fellow at the Oslo Metropolitan University in artificial intelligence. And she's dealing with issues of trustworthiness and ethics. Although she was from the hard sciences, now she has gone to those areas. The artificial intelligence does not replace human intelligence. If it is time, please don't be kama muda umefika nionyeshe tu. Mimi naweza nikazungumza mpaka asubuhi. Na ratiba ni muhimu. I want just to talk about one thing when it comes to artificial intelligence. And I'm happy that today you are addressing issues of ethics and that is prudent. There are questions which we need to ask ourselves. Which approach do we take? Do we take the European approach of where they have started with a legal framework to regulate artificial intelligence because there are good sides and there are also pitfalls of artificial intelligence? Or do we take the position which has been taken by others, going full force in artificial intelligence before putting in a regulatory authority? And in this, I would want us to have a regional approach. I've been reading the Business Daily. I know efforts which are being done in Kenya. But when it comes to regulation of artificial intelligence, let us have a regional approach and not a country approach. We like it or not, as I've said. We are not only neighbors. Now we are doing a lot of business together. And sometimes, we spend much more time on our woes, but not on what we have done well. The East African community is the most robust and dynamic regional organization, not only in Africa, but in the world. Indeed. In the world. And I will say so. The European Union started in 1956 as Iron and Steel Union. Because after the Second World War, Germany and France were bitter enemies, and there was no way they could sit together. And it is when the Americans with the Marshall Plan told the Europeans the only way now Europe to survive as a zone and a regional peace is integration. Integration. And I want to tell you that in 1967, when the East African community collapsed, we are more advanced than the European economic community. In 1967. In 1977. We are more developed than the European economic community. Between 1967 and 1977, you did not need a passport to travel within East Africa. It was only your ID. Why? Because we had one railway company, the East African Railway Corporation. We had one airline, the East African Airways. We had one post and telecommunication, the East African Post and Telecommunication Corporation. We had one marine services for the entire Lake Victoria. And you do not need to carry any coins in your wallet. You would travel from Dar es Salaam to Nairobi and go to a post bank and draw your money and equally go to Uganda. We had one university, the University of East Africa. And when finally in 1970, the University of East Africa was disbanded, and the last place for Mwalimu as the Chancellor of University of Dar es Salaam to come and install a new Chancellor was Nairobi. He started with Dar es Salaam and then Makerere and finally Nairobi. And when he installed Jomo Kenyatta as the Chancellor of the University of Nairobi, Mwalimu wept. And the East African Standard mocked Mwalimu. And what did Mwalimu say? He says, finally, I am witnessing the death of our identity as East Africans. The death of our identity as East Africans. When I was the Dean of the Faculty of Law of University of Dar es Salaam, and when we were celebrating our Golden Jubilee, 50 years, for me, it was a special occasion because I had 3 Chief Justices who were classmates in Dar es Salaam. Evans Gesheru, Benjamin Odok, and Agustino Ramadan, which won't happen today. Imagine sitting in a room there, you have the Chief Justice of Kenya, Evans Gesheru, Chief Justice of Uganda, Benjamin Odok, Chief Justice of Tanzania, Agustino Ramadhani, and they are all classmates. That was East Africa. And the idea of Mwalimu was say, okay, let each country create its own national university, but let us retain the University of East Africa. This is why the generation at that time, all lawyers, or the majority of them, went to Dar es Salaam. Why Nairobi later on had a faculty of law is not the story to tell you today. That is a story for another day. Because I don't want to revive the spirit of Charles Njonjo in this room today. So all lawyers, all who did political science and education went to Dar es Salaam. And all who did engineering, veterinary medicine, and commerce came to Nairobi. And all who did medicine, agriculture, and forestry went to Makerere. And they were able to create East Africans. And when I was a minister for foreign affairs and the East African community, I always said we spend too much on protocols, on memorandum of understanding. We forget that we need now to create this East Africanness. And in the legal profession, we need to create it more. We look at ourselves today as competitors and not as people who can collaborate to develop this region. So this is why I said actually we are the most developed. Look at the EAC, compare it with the ECOWAS, compare it with the European Union. Here there is much commonality compared to the European Union. Which means what? We need to work on our strength. Without ignoring our weaknesses, but to work on our strength. Now, in artificial intelligence, we need a regional approach. And one of the things which I would want to talk about is language. One good thing about artificial, and actually we don't know, it is my daughter who was telling me, actually for the last 30 years, we are interacting with the artificial intelligence without knowing. I'm sure most of you who did such, immediately something will come on our phone or computer without asking, because already they have learned your interest. And who you, if your interest is those things which you don't want the public to see. Because they'll prop up when you're with other people and they'll be busy now, switching off. Because they have studied your character and your interest. And you know, these things come at the most awkward places and times. Just as when WhatsApp started, and the WhatsApp groups before this issue of deleting for all. You would post something which you did not intend for that group. And for the rest of the month, you hide yourself. Because it has gone to where it was not supposed to be destined. Yeah. Or in a family group, you have commented, you have admired the beauty in a wrong forum. And now you have a serious problem of calling your brothers, please put more other info so that this one is so that this one is we've been interacting, and there is one tool which is now very useful, the Google Translator. That is AI. The Google Translator is AI. Now, I was reading one constitutional petition here in Kenya. I think it is about the use of Kiswahili in enactment of laws and courts of law. And I went through the whole. I have it here, but for the sake of time, I don't want to read it. And that is what prompted me to say what I want to say. In Tanzania, since 1964, when we had a unified court system, because before 1964, our courts were based on racial ground. The Africans were their judges. I mean, their magistrates were chiefs, native chiefs. But in '64, we had a unified court system, and the lowest rank is primary court. And from 1964, the language of primary court was Kiswahili, but the language of the district court, resident magistrate court, high court, and court of appeal is English. Although again, the Court of Appeal was the first now to allow people to address the Court of Appeal in Swahili, in Kiswahili. And is when now we discovered serious problems. And this is what I want to talk about. But in the administration of John Pombe Magufuli, the laws were amended, and now the language of the laws of the United Republic of Tanzania must be Kiswahili. And we are now translating the current English laws into Kiswahili. But although the law also gives latitude of using English where the Chief Justice permits so, and some of the bills are all now written in Kiswahili, but some of the most basic are translated into English. And again, I would want a regional approach to this, especially for us who want to use Kiswahili. The East African Kiswahili Council needs to work on this. When I read the Kiswahili in Kenya, and when I was reading the constitutional petition, my worry is we feed this to the virtual world. And when it comes to translation, there will be a lot of inconsistencies. So I would want to urge the Law Society of Kenya to team up with the Tanganyika Law Society, but also the bench and the bar, I mean the bench in Kenya and the bench in Tanzania. We agree on common, now I'll say it in Swahili, kukubaliana kuhusu msamiati na istilahi za kisheria. Msamiati na istilahi za kisheria katika lugha ya Kiswahili. When we say istilahi, it means nomenclatures. Nomenclatures, istilahi. So that when now we go full force in using Kiswahili as a language of our courts and enactment of laws, there are agreed nomenclatures and vocabulary. When I was reading this petition in Kenya, and here I'm very careful. I'm very careful. Very, very careful. I don't want to say which Swahili is better and which Swahili is not better. This is not my business here. After all, when I was a student of literature, Kiswahili literature in high school, some of the books which we did were from Mombasa. Malenga wa Mvita and Sauti ya Dhiki. This is a Mvita dialect. And coincidentally, what I'm suggesting is not new. It was done by the British and Foreign Bible Society. Up to 1952, the British and Foreign Bible Societies were publishing 2 Bibles, Kiswahili Bibles. One in Kimvita dialect, and another one in Kiunguja dialect. And this way, in 1952, they came with what is known as SUV. And those here in Kenya who read the Bible, you see SUV, which means Swahili Union Version, which combined the Kimvita Bible and the Kiunguja Bible. And at the end of the Bible, there's Faharisi, which means index of words. The Mvita would say Jimbi, but the Unguja would say Jogo. So it would say Jo, Jimbi. And I'm an Anglican, by the way. And in the Tanzania, We are the only country in East and Central Africa where we have the two traditions of the Anglican Church, the Anglo-Catholics and the Evangelicals. Here in Kenya, all of you are Evangelicals. And actually, when I'm in Mombasa, and this is why I would want to change my flight back tomorrow, I must go back to the Mombasa Memorial Cathedral. Up to 1927, 2/3 of Tanzanian Anglicans were under the Diocese of Mombasa. And our bishop was from Mombasa. And we still have a lot of heritage with Mombasa. We still use the Nyimbo standard. And the Nyimbo standard is Kimvita Kiswahili. So every Sunday, and even next Sunday, and I'll be in church to go and thank God for this good position I've been given by Her Excellency. I'll be singing in Kimvita. Although I'll be reading the Bible and the prayers in Kiunguja, which means we as lawyers, we need to agree on what terms. Here I've been reading this petition, and I don't want to correct it. I want us to agree on what are the common Swahili istilahi. In Tanzania, complainant is mlalamikaji. Here is mlalamishi. And when you say mlalamishi in Tanzania, it is negative. It ina maana hasi. Ukitumia neno mlalamishi lina maana hasi. It has a negative connotation. Ukitumia neno mlalamikaji ina maana chanya, which means it has a positive connotation. So we need to agree at this stage. And now I'm speaking as a minister, that we as lawyers in Kenya and as lawyers in Tanzania to agree, sit down, so that when we feed this in the virtual world, then when we go now to Google Translator, we'll have the same words. Ladies and gentlemen, when I look at Evans or Gada, it means I have overspent my time and I'm slowly becoming useless and a nuisance. So before I become useless and a nuisance, let me once again thank you so much for inviting me to come to be your chief guest. I'm not in my best because of flu. And the one big mistake I did, again prejudicial, when I was invited to the Royal Society of Kenya, I had to look for my best suit, which is a mistake I did. Because now I'm the most uncomfortable person in this room, when all of you are so comfortable. And when I was looking at my suitcase, I said, I wish I had taken my other clothes, which really suit this environment. But this shows the evening will be even more grandeur. And me and Martha, we still have the vitality of the youth, but also the frailty of the old. So when you see us dancing slowly, don't worry much, because age is numbers and not the way we appear. Once again, Madam President, I thank you so much for inviting me to this meeting. I was coming here as a humble member of Parliament, but I think your prayers and the prayers of the Law Society of Kenya touched the heart of my revered President, Samia Suluhu Hassan, to appoint me to that position. And actually it came as a surprise, because few hours before, when I was preparing myself to come to travel, is when I received a telephone call and I was asked, where are you? I said, I'm in Dar es Salaam preparing myself to go to Kenya. Then I was told, please cancel the trip. You'll be informed later of what is, why you have to cancel your trip to Kenya. Until I was informed of the impending appointment and the final appointment. And this is my third time in that post. And I am a politician by default, unlike Martha. By default, I was thrown in politics. But now I know, I don't want to say I'm addicted. Now I'm happy. I'm happy in that world. And I'm happy in that world. And I'm happy that I've been given another lease of life. But for all of you, you are warmly welcome. For all of you here in Tanzania, you are also welcome to other Tanzania. And for all of you who are going back to Kenya, I wish you all the best. But let us remember one thing. We are Kenyans, we are Tanzanians, we are Ugandans, we are Rwandese, we are Burundians, not out of our design. Not out of our design. And we should not allow that which was not out of design to be a hindrance to our progress. We need to be East Africans. And to be East Africans, First and foremost, let us learn to respect and tolerate each other. Let us learn to respect and tolerate each other. But also let us accept we have only one common destiny. We as Africans, we are living in a very harsh and cruel world. And if we don't unite and work together, we are doomed forever. But if we work together, we'll do much better. And lucky enough, each country has been given something to offer to the community. If you want entrepreneurship, it's Kenya. If you want innovation, it is Rwanda. If you want vision, it is Tanzania. Vision, yes. Vision, yeah, vision, maono. If you want maono, it's Tanzania. But if you want also resilience, it is Burundi and the DRC. So you see, if we bring all that together, we are special. The entrepreneurship of Kenya, sometimes you're not happy with your pusher, but sometimes it helps us to wake up. If you have a pack of East Africans, and I'm finishing, Evans, if you have a pack of East Africans, and you see one East African is busy pushing others, 98% she or he is Kenyan. And if you see someone is totally aloof, 98 or 90% is Tanzanian. And if you find someone wandering around, I don't want to mention other countries. So indeed, I thank you so much for this invitation. Madam President, you invited me as a member of parliament, so please invite me again now as a minister for justice. Asanteni sana.